Yeah. Good afternoon. Okay, that's on. Yes. So I hope your day has been good, that you're getting some rest. So this afternoon's conference is about Brigid of Kildare and prayer with the element of fire. One of my connections with Brigid of Kildare was I was making Brigid crosses on near Brigid's feast day in our inner city neighborhood in Erie with children who were refugees from Burma. They had lived for 9 years in a refugee camp in Bhutan, and then they ended up in Erie and were on the inner city block where I lived and gardened with them. But in the wintertime, we did inside activities. So I thought I would teach them all about Brigid crosses, and we'd make them with pipe cleaners. And as I was showing them, they told me all about Brigid and showed me how to make the crosses. And here their grandmother had taught them when they were in the refugee camp, their grandmother had taught them all about Brigid of Kildare and how to make the Brigid crosses. So the story of Brigid was largely unknown until lately, except where it was kept alive in pockets around the globe, primarily where the Sisters of St. Brigid have lived and ministered. So who is Brigid of Kildare? And again, there's a handout that you'll receive at the end of the session. She was a monastic founder, an abbess of both a monastery of women and a monastery of men. She was a church leader known for her great mercy and care for the poor. She was born in 452 at a time when Christianity was slowly taking root in Ireland, in that Celtic culture and religion. So she lived at the same time as Patrick. And so this is real early Christianity in Ireland. And you'll notice it's pre-Benedict, a little before Benedict. Brigid of Kildare bridges and integrates the earlier Celtic spirituality and Christianity. The lore and the rituals and the hagiography and the traditions of Saint Brigid of Kildare are really impossible to separate from her namesake, the Celtic goddess Brigid or Bree. Both are identified with the coming of spring, that midpoint between the winter solstice and the spring equinox. They are both associated with the sacred fire, with healing wells, with fertility. Both are celebrated on February 1st. A bit about the monastery that Brigid founded. Her monastery was really a monastic city, as some of the Celtic monasteries were. She named it Kildare or Kildare, meaning Church of the Oak, which was very unusual to name an area, a church after a tree. But she recognized the strength of the oak tree. The thriving city contained a monastery for women, a monastery for men. There were two wings connected to the parish church. And so they prayed together in the church, but they had separate monastic spaces. There were cottages for families. There were places for laborers, and this was all surrounded by pasture and fields. The village included workshops and really all the things that were needed for life. Brigid's monastery was an important center of hospitality, culture, education, and worship in Ireland and beyond until the 16th century suppression of monasteries with the Reformation. So what do we know of Brigid historically? Well, not much, really. We have two different versions of the life of Brigid, as well as different oral traditions. This tradition, as in most ancient saints of her time, including Benedict, right, are hagiography. So their stories tell the meaning of the saint's life. They teach their wisdom, they share their message. They are not necessarily historic. That was not the point. They're not historical biographies. They are true. Historical reality is not the reason that they're written. It's the truth of their lives. So Brigid was revered in her time and important enough that centuries later, lives were written about her. She's said to have been born of Christian parents. Her mother was a slave woman and her father a powerful chieftain. As with other hagiographies, there are some great stories about her birth that seem to indicate the importance of this person. It said on the night of her birth that the stars sang a beautiful and rare music, and that the music attracted an old Druid priest, a priest of the old way, and he came out of the woods to find the child responsible for the star's delight. And he saw a pillar of fire from the house and found Brigid with her mother surrounded by the other women. He took Brigid in her arms, held her up, and told her mother that she would be revered by all of Ireland and that she would help her people to the new way. He is said to have given her a blue cloak, which was an unusual color in those times. And the cloak figures into a number of the stories of Brigid and continues in the tradition of the Brigid cloak that is put out on the eve of the feast day and is said to have been blessed by Brigid. And then that cloak is used as a healing cloak during the year. The Broch Brie, as they call it. Brigid, as a young girl, had a vision where she was transported to Bethlehem and was present with Mary when Jesus was born, and she wrapped the newborn Jesus in her cloak. In all of these stories, we see that Brigid brings Mary, the Divine Mother, close to the Irish people. One of her titles is Mary of the Gale. So through Brigid, they can relate with Mary, just as Brigid shows them and brings the power of the goddess Brigid and points to the power of the risen Christ. There's a long written and oral tradition that Brigid was ordained a bishop. Now here's how it happened. And this is from the life of Brigid that was written in the 700s by the priest Cogitosus. It says that under the influence of the spirit, Bishop Mel ordained Brigid a bishop. She and 7 other women had asked to be consecrated as virgins or to take the monastic life. And when the hour for this arrived, he was, as Bishop Mel was ordaining her, consecrating her, he was intoxicated with the grace of God and did not know that he was reciting from the book, consecrating her with the order of bishop. He said later that only this virgin in the whole of Ireland will hold the episcopal ordination. And while she was being consecrated, it was said that a fiery column ascended from her head. I find that very interesting. Usually when you have the imposition of hands and the sending of the Spirit. But in this case, it was with this consecration, the fire ascended from Brigid and was visible to others. The abbesses of Kildare after Brigid continued to have this authority with and were considered a bishop. They were part of the Irish Bishops' Conference until this practice was finally ended officially at the Synod of Kells in 1152. So much later, they finally had to have a decree and say, no, the Abbess of Kildare is not a bishop. Some of the stories that give a flavor for her generosity. Care for the poor. The life of Brigid is filled with stories of Brigid as a child giving away the family's food or butter and then having it miraculously be replaced. This happened also when she fed starving animals, the meat that was intended for her own family. It would miraculously reappear just before she would get in trouble for giving away the family's meat. There are stories that she lived much of her life with her powerful chieftain father, and she gave away so many of the household valuables that her father tried to sell her to the king. As her father was trying to negotiate this deal with the king, Brigid was outside in the carriage, and there was a poor starving beggar who asked for bread. She didn't have any bread to give him, so she gave him her father's sword that he could sell for bread. Well, her father was furious and the deal did not go through. He was stuck with her. There's a great story when she was abbess that a local peasant had mistakenly taken the king's pet fox as prey and killed it. He didn't know it was the king's pet. The furious king had the peasant locked up and planned to kill him unless he could replace the fox that he had killed. Well, the other peasants went to Brigid and begged her to help. So she got in her carriage and headed out to talk with the king to try to negotiate release for this poor peasant. On the way, a fox ran from the forest, jumped into her cart, and sat next to her. When they arrived at the palace, the fox began to perform tricks that delighted the king and let him know that this was his new pet. So the peasant was freed and safely on his way. Brigid was headed back to Kildare, and the clever fox snuck away back to the forest and to freedom. But the peasant was free, so all was well. As abbess, Brigid was responsible for all the parishes in her area. There are several stories of her miraculously providing food or providing milk or beer, especially during times of famine. There was one Easter season when not one parish had beer to celebrate for the season, for the feast. Brigid turned water into beer, enough to be delivered to every parish for the entire Easter season. We don't know about Brigid's individual prayer form, but we know that she was drawn to prayer from an early age, that she was intent on seeking the religious life. Her compassion and care for others was legendary from an early age and had a tremendous and growing impact in her times. Her heart expanded in love to include all those in her whole region. Brigid also kept the goddess Brigid, the divine feminine, close to the Irish people. She tended an eternal sacred flame, fire, that was originally associated with the goddess Brigid. Brigid kept the flame alive and offered it as the light of Christ. The fire was tended at her monastery by herself and 19 of the sisters who would each take a turn spending the night tending the fire. After Brigid's death, the story goes, she continued to be given the 20th night. In the 12th century, 700 years after Brigid, Gerald of Wales visited Kildare and included in his notes that the sacred fire was continuously burning there and could be seen from miles away. And he noted that it was tended there by 19 nuns, with St. Brigid taking the 20th night. So this flame, this eternal flame of the goddess Brigid, now known to her people as the light of Christ, was kept alive by her community in her monastery for hundreds of years later. Fire, especially in the winter, in the cold, damp place like Ireland, was essential for life and nourishment and also for comfort. In the home, the woman of the house was responsible for tending the fire in the home. This included banking the fire each night, careful to preserve the hot coals overnight, and prevent fires during the night. The women prayed to St. Brigid to bless the hearth and the home and the family and keep them safe through the night. And she prayed again to Brigid as she fed the fire in the morning and blew gently on the protected hot coals to ignite them into hot flames that would comfort the family for the day. We know that the sacred fire continued in Kildare until the Reformation, sometime in the 16th century. And then early in the 1800s, the then Bishop of Kildare restored the ancient order of Brigid, now as a missionary order. And in 93, the Sisters of St. Brigid relit the eternal fire in Kildare. They tended the perpetual flame in a prayer room of their home dedicated to St. Brigid, much like a sanctuary light. Several years ago, they opened a whole new center to St. Brigid in Kildare, where the eternal flame is now tended. And the sisters are often asked to bring the flame as blessing to many events that are happening in the area. So the legend of St. Brigid and fire have deep significance. The fire stories are stories about the light of Christ, the symbol and reminder of the resurrection, the triumph of life over death, present with us always. The light of Christ is warmth and nourishment, and at a deep level, life. Fire is one of the 4 basic elements necessary for life. It is warmth and comfort. But in our time, when we consider the element of fire, we also face the issue of climate crisis and global scorching and the violence of weapons of mass destruction. Brigid invites us in this retreat time to stoke the flames of love, to blow on the embers and unleash the passion, the love of Christ, to bring the light of Christ, the fire of love, to our own times. I'd like now to have a simple prayer, a very simple prayer with the element of fire. So we'll take a moment just to center ourselves. We have the sanctuary light here. We focus now on this element of fire, this candle, which is a reminder for us, right, of the light of Christ, the risen Christ. we'll sing a very simple refrain. So I'll sing it once and then we'll sing it together. It's like we repeat, it's 2 lines. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. So each time we sing it, we'll sing it 2 times. We'll sing that line 2 times. So we focus on the fire and we sing the refrain. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Then I'd invite you to stretch out your hand toward the fire, or you can simply visualize this if that's difficult. And then bring the flame, imagine that you're bringing the flame back to bless your head. And as you do that, bless your mind. May your mind be strengthened with the light of Christ. May the fire of Christ, the passion of Christ, already present in you, be strengthened. May your understanding be clear and true and tender. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. And now we stretch toward the fire again and imagine that you are bringing the fire to your eyes. May the light of Christ, always present in yours, already present in your seeing, increase, that you may see with the eyes of Christ, with the eyes of love. May your seeing be clear and true and tender. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. And now we stretch our hand toward the fire and bring the light of Christ to your mouth. May the light of Christ already present in your speaking increase, that you may speak it with words of love and truth and courage. May your speaking be clear and true and tender. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. And then stretch your hand to the light of Christ and bring the light of Christ to your heart. May the light of Christ already present in your heart increase, that you may relate as Christ, that you may act as Christ would, with acts of love and truth and courage. May your loving be clear and true and tender and all-inclusive. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. And finally, bring the light of Christ to bless your whole body. May the light of Christ already present in your body be strengthened. May your body be healed in any way that is needed. May it be comforted and cared for, that you may bring comfort and care and healing and love to others. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in us. Jesus Christ, inner light, be strong in